Herzlich willkommen, liebe Zuschauer, zu einer weiteren Folge von Im Auge des Bruders mit Scott Ritter hier auf unserem YouTube-Kanal Gegenpol. Mein Name ist Monique Stegemann und in dieser Woche haben wir folgende Themen. Nigeria als Speerspitze in der Militärintervention gegen Niger? Welche Chancen haben Niger, Mali und Burkina Faso in einem Krieg gegen die vom Westen unterstützten ECOWAS-Kräfte? Außerdem, welche Rolle spielen Luftstreitkräfte und Drohnen im Ukraine-Krieg? Hallo Scott, schön dich zu sehen und dass du die Zeit genommen hast.
Good morning, how are you?
Mir geht's sehr gut, wie geht es dir?
Doing well, thank you.
Das freut mich. Scott, wenn du möchtest, starten wir direkt in die erste Frage.
Okay.
Die Lage in Niger, die spitzt sich zu, Scott. Nach dem Ablauf des ECOWAS-Ultimatums sind Nigeria, Senegal, Benin und die Elfenbeinküste dabei, Truppen zu sammeln für eine Militärintervention in Niger. Französische Medien sprechen von 25.000 Soldaten. Ein Großteil davon soll Nigeria stellen. Warum hat der nigerianische Präsident, der berüchtigte Pate von Lagos, Bola Tinubu, so ein großes Interesse an einer Militärintervention im Nachbarland? Und hat Nigeria überhaupt die militärischen und logistischen Kapazitäten, um so eine komplexe Operation zu stemmen?
Well, I think when we take a look at the ECOWAS community, Nigeria plays a major role. It's a leader in the ECOWAS community, and what's happening right now is we're seeing a fracturing of ECOWAS. The coup in Niger is just the most recent in a series of coups that have transpired in ECOWAS nations. Mali, Burkina Faso come to mind, both of whom were suspended. I think Guinea also suspended memberships. Niger is now a suspended membership. So a significant part of ECOWAS is no longer part of ECOWAS. And if ECOWAS collapses, as it appears to be in the process of doing, Nigeria loses significant a significant vector of regional influence. And so it's in the interests of Nigeria to be seen as taking a leading role in enforcing the community standards, so to speak, of ECOWAS. It's not going to work, though. The problem is that Nigeria, while it has a large army, it's the largest army in the region. It's a military that has shown itself to be rather ineffective in dealing with its own internal security issues. Boko Haram, insurgency is proof positive of this. It's one thing to carry out a counterinsurgency operation on your own soil, falling in on lines of communication, internal lines of communication. It's another thing altogether to project power into the territory of another nation, especially when that power projection will be resisted. Nigeria has not fought a ground war in Africa in many, many years, not since the Nigerian Civil War. They've been involved in a variety of minor skirmishes, but the Nigerian army is not a combat-hardened army. Neither is Niger or Mali or Burkina Faso, for that instance. They've all participated in counterinsurgency operations, counterterrorism operations. But you know who has fought large-scale ground combat on a level that nobody in the world has experienced? Wagner. And Wagner is engaged right now in the Niger saga. Wagner forces are deploying, and these are combat-hardened people. They know how to kill. And unfortunately, that will be the end result of the 25,000 ECOWAS troops, should they be foolish enough to go forward and deploy. They will be slaughtered. None will survive. They'll be taken prisoner. They'll be killed. That's it. Because Wagner plays for keeps. This isn't going to be some sort of, minor skirmishing, etc. This will be life and death. An interesting, note will be what will be the role of I think there's 5,000 French troops in Niger, the 1,100 American troops. What role will they play in this conflict. And I should remind people that just because your uniform says America or France on it, numbers are a reality. And should either France or the United States become heavily engaged in combat operations in Niger, they don't have the force structure to have survivability when it comes to large-scale ground combat. And it's sort of a warning notice to them that they might want to consider, A, de-escalating this, making sure that we're not talking about military options, and B, if ECOWAS is going to commit these troops, to remain neutral. Because if the United States and France get involved, then this becomes a regional conflict, and Africa will be, will see itself engaged in, a deeply destructive war that the likes of which have not been seen on, especially in Western Africa, ever, especially in modern history. So this is a very dangerous situation. Unfortunately, the Nigerian president seems more than happy to disregard the will of the people. The Senate apparently voted down authorizing this deployment of forces. His own military think tanks have said this will be a disaster. But he puts his legacy as the leader of ECOWAS ahead of the needs and wants of his people.
Schaut man sich Niger auf der Landkarte an, Scott, sieht man, dass der Südwesten um die Hauptstadt Niamey am dichtesten besiedelt ist. Faktisch dürfte es so sein, dass die Herrschaft über Niamey zentral ist für die Kontrolle über den Niger. Niamey grenzt aber an Mali und Burkina Faso, die deutlich gemacht haben, Niger militärisch gegen die ECOWAS zu unterstützen. Wie würde also eine Militärintervention der ECOWAS in Niger ablaufen? Würden sich die ECOWAS-Truppen auf Niamey stürzen oder versuchen, dieses zu belagern? Und welchen Part werden dabei die USA und Frankreich übernehmen? Luftschläge, Truppentransporte oder auch Bodentruppen?
Well, France already has ground troops, and the United States has a special forces contingent deployed there. So should they get involved, they would play a supporting role. What would a ECOWAS invasion into Niger look like? A lot of dead people. That's just the bottom line. This is not going to be, similar to the previous ECOWAS intervention in the Gambia back when there was when the former government decided it didn't want to step aside after an election. ECOWAS intervened and through just flexing their muscles got them to back down. Niger is not backing down. Niger will fight. And Niger has support, as you said, from Mali, Burkina Faso, and they probably get support elsewhere. I mean, we know that Wagner is deployed. Algeria has indicated that they will not stand by idly while nations invade Niger. Chad has taken a neutral position, but one that could easily swing in favor of Niger. Like I said, this has the potential of becoming a regional conflict at a time when neither France nor the United States can afford to get bogged down in such. 5,000 troops is not a lot of troops. It's a lot when you're dealing with, a few thousand Islamic State terrorists spread out over a large area. It's not a lot of troops when suddenly you're dealing with 80, 90, 100,000 organized forces coming against you. The other thing is, while terrorists don't have anything more than light anti-air weaponry that's easily avoided by modern jet aircraft, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso have modern air defense. Wagner has modern air defense, and any effort to sway the battle in favor of ECOWAS by either France or the United States by deploying aircraft could very easily find a situation where American or French aircraft are shot down, and now we have dead pilots, captured pilots. This could get ugly very fast. The one thing I could say with certainty is this is not going to be a quick, bloodless military intervention. If ECOWAS does go forward, I think it's the beginning of a regional conflict that will that will destabilize not only West Africa, but all of Africa and indeed Europe. I don't think people have reflected on the damage that would be done to France economically and politically by a conflict in Niger.
Du sprachst über die Gruppe Wagner in Niger, Scott. Wie können wir sicher sein, dass sie tatsächlich bereits in Niger operiert? Gibt es Beweise dafür?
I mean, right now we're dealing with, first of all, Wagner is not a government entity. It's a private military contractor. So they don't really care whether you and I have proof. They don't operate based upon trying to impress you or trying to impress me. We know Wagner exists in Mali. They're in Mali in significant numbers, several thousand. We know that Burkina Faso has expressed an interest in a Wagner presence. We don't know that it has manifested itself, and we know that Niger has likewise expressed an interest in Wagner. In terms of the proof of existence, so to speak, that will come at a time and place of Wagner's choosing, I guess. Like I said, they're not out there to impress us, to inform us, to keep us happy. They're there to accomplish whatever task it is that they're given. And if their task in defending Niger is one that's been formalized, I think we'll find out Wagner's presence the first time Nigerian forces get slaughtered in battle.
Wenn Wagner tatsächlich schon im Niger wäre, stellen sich damit Fragen. Der russische Außenminister hat eindeutig den Putsch im Niger verurteilt. Würde eine Entsendung von Wagner eine de facto Anerkennung der Militärjunta in Niger gleichkommen?
I think Russia recognizes the rule of law, and they have rightfully called out their opposition to unconstitutional means of political change. But if you look at the St. Petersburg gathering, the Russian Africa gathering, one of the stars of the show was the junta leader from Burkina Faso, who traveled to St. Petersburg and was received by Russia as the legitimate leader of Burkina Faso. And I think the reason is because at this juncture, it's recognized by Russia that the coup ousted an unpopular government. Russia has recognized the coup in Mali because the coup ousted an unpopular government. And I believe in time, Russia will voice recognition and support for the junta in Niger because it represents the ouster of an unpopular government. So diplomacy is a funny game. You have to say things and you have to posture in order to maintain a semblance of consistency in terms of core values. But real politic is also something. And if you look at the situation from a Russian perspective, while Russia is not encouraging war, and I believe Russia would do whatever it can to de-escalate this problem, Russia does recognize that the divorce that is taking place between former French colonies in Africa and France is destabilizing for France, weakens the European Union, weakens NATO, and therefore at a time when Russia is in an existential struggle against a collective West that includes all of those elements, this is a good thing for Russia. So I think Russia's going to enjoy the ride, so to speak, because sometimes when Mother Nature is doing something that's to your benefit, the best thing to do is just to sit back and let it happen.
Vergleichen wir mal den Putsch in Niger mit dem Putsch in der Ukraine der Jahre 2013 und 2014. In beiden Fällen entsandte Washington die Diplomatin Victoria Nuland im Niger, um die Militärregierung aufzufordern, abzutreten. Damals in der Ukraine, um der Putschregierung die Hand zu reichen, Kekse zu verteilen und auf das Zögern Brüssels mit Fuck the EU zu reagieren. Woher kommt diese völlige Gegensätzlichkeit des Westens im Umgang mit Staatsstreichs? Ist ein Putsch dann in Ordnung, wenn er dem Westen nutzt?
You know, there's that old saying, one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. It all depends on where you're sitting and what your perspective is. I think it's not that the coup benefited the West directed the coup. The United States instigated the coup, at least the violent aspect of the coup in Kiev. It was an American-backed coup, our coup. So, of course, Victoria Nuland was there handing out cookies and making sure that her man Yats was put in power. And and things of this nature. In Niger, it's not an American-backed coup. It's a coup that's being instigated by legitimate social forces from within a nation that have decided that a government that has sold out to France is no longer welcome to govern. Niger has poverty. Why do you have poverty in a country that has so much wealth? The uranium wealth, gold, mine, diamonds, the whole thing. It's because France has turned it into a colonial concession where the majority of the wealth goes to France and very little filters back down to the people of Niger. I think that the coup represents the reality that the people of Niger are fed up with the situation and that they want their wealth to benefit themselves. So, that's the difference. A coup is backed by the United States when it benefits the United States. But when a coup benefits the people of a nation, irrespective of where the United States stands, then that coup becomes inconvenient, especially when that coup puts allies of the United States, France, in a difficult position.
Bleiben wir beim Thema Ukraine-Krieg. Nachdem du letzte Woche so ausführlich die Rolle der Panzer in der modernen Kriegsführung analysiert hast, haben unsere Zuschauer die Frage gestellt, welche Rolle spielen die Luftstreitkräfte in der modernen Kriegsführung? Wie werden sie im Ukraine-Krieg eingesetzt?
I mean, air power is a decisive element of any conflict, especially when employed by nations that A, have it, and B, know how to use it, and C, are in an operational environment where it can be used effectively. If we take a look at air power, both Ukraine and Russia continue to employ air power to great effect. One of the strongest strike capabilities of Ukraine are Su-24 fighter bombers, former Soviet-era fighter bombers that have been adapted to carry the Storm Shadow or the Scalp air-to-ground cruise missile. And the Ukrainians continue to use these Su-24s to great effect, striking targets, in throughout the special military operation area of operations. Ukraine continues to fly Su-25 ground support aircraft and a variety of helicopters, HIP helicopters, etc., Mi-24 Hinds. But it's more difficult for them because as Ukraine projects air power towards the line of contact, they run into the reality of Russian air defense systems, and they suffer heavy casualties as a result. Russia has taken advantage of the fact that the Ukrainian air defense capabilities along the front line have been severely weakened. And so you see Russian helicopters playing a very critical role in destroying Ukrainian armor formations as they close on Russian defenses. You see the Russians using a variety of aircraft, Su-25s and others, to deliver these glide bombs, the so-called Fab 250s, Fab 500s, 500 and the 1,000-pound bombs that are delivered with great precision on frontline positions and areas where the Ukrainians are gathering their forces, command and control logistics. Russian air power is having a significant impact on the battlefield. Right now, we're dealing with a situation with Russia where they're primarily static in nature, responding to Ukrainian attacks. So Russian air power is used to disrupt these attacks. At some point in time, if Russia goes over on the offensive, you'll see the air power being employed in support of the maneuver of Russian forces. The Russians have also hit Ukraine with strategic air. If you take a look at the damage that's been done historically to the Ukrainian energy sector, and you see the ongoing strikes that are taking place in Ukraine, in Odessa, to disrupt the port operations there, and in other places to disrupt logistics site and command and control sites. The Russians are having a major impact. In the West, we look at Russia's operations, which appear to be more of a standoff nature than what we would normally employ. In the West, our aircraft have historically been used in close air support roles, direct support of troops on the ground. So they're There, you could see them. The Russians don't have their planes flying over the target. They approach it from a standoff. So there's a difference in tactics, which leads to a difference in visualization, which leads to a difference in perception. And I think in the West, because the Russian tactics differ from ours, we perceive it that the Russian air power is not having the presence on the battlefield that one would expect if it was Western air power, for instance, what we were used to seeing in Afghanistan, Iraq, with close air support being provided by aircraft coming straight up to the target. The Russians don't operate that way, but Russian air power it plays a major role in what's going on and will continue to play a major role in what's going on.
Lass uns bei der Luftabwehr ins Detail gehen. Die Ukraine wurde vom Westen mit diversen Flugabwehrsystemen ausgestattet, auch mit modernen Varianten von Patriot oder der deutschen ihre. Ist dies ein Faktor dafür, dass Russland zögerlicher ist beim Einsatz seiner Luftstreitkräfte? Wie effektiv funktioniert Patriot, auch angesichts russischer Hyperschallraketen vom Typ Kinschall?
I mean, the Patriot system is, first of all, an old system that's been upgraded over the years, but it's still an old system, old operating theory, so to speak. It's historically not been a very effective weapon system. I think in an ideal situation, is the Patriot capable of shooting down a Russian aircraft? Yes. And the Russians have to treat it with respect. So too is the IRIS-T, so too is the NASAMS, so too is any one of the multitude of air defense systems that have been brought into Ukraine. One of the there's a couple things. Again, the Russian tactics are designed to avoid air defense. So it's hard to say that because of Ukrainian air defense, Russia has changed its behavior. When Russian behavior was designed to be that way regardless of the air defense. The other thing we do know is that Ukrainian air defense has not been that effective. One of the reasons why the Russians enjoy the latitude they have to employ air power on the line of contact is that Ukrainian air defense has been largely suppressed in that area, and including further back. And when I mean suppressed, I mean destroyed. The Russians have carried out a very effective and lethal suppression of enemy air defense campaign over the course of the past few months, where they have sought out and destroyed the Western provided air defense systems. The Ukrainians don't like to talk about it, and I guess the Russians, for their reasons, haven't provided overwhelming evidentiary support to back up their claims. But it appears that many of the Patriot systems have been destroyed or damaged, and the Patriot systems that are in operation have cycled through their supply of missiles because the methodology that they use when facing off against a Russian attack, it's a automatic response. They have their system on automatic, which means as they detect an incoming attack, the computer takes over and starts firing the missiles as it deems best to respond to the threat. And the Russians are gaming this system, so as they come in, they're getting the Patriots to fire all their missiles at nothing, and then two things. One, the Russians are able to strike the targets they want to strike without fear of the Patriot. And two, they're eating up the ammunition. The fact is, the West is running out of Patriot missiles to give to Ukraine. There's just not enough missiles there. This is why Russian airstrikes are able to hit their targets almost at will throughout Ukraine. And one of the reasons why it's so difficult for Ukraine to do this is not only what the Russians are doing in response, but for instance, when we speak of integrated air defense, that's where you take different systems and they work in harmony with one another. Short range system, medium range system, long range systems. The radars talk to each other through a centralized communication system, a command center. It gets to evaluate all the data, then select the systems it wants to fire upon, etc. But if you're taking over a Soviet era air defense network, which Ukraine did initially, then you have an integrated air defense system because the S-300 was meant to talk to the Puk, was meant to talk to this, was meant to talk to that. But now you're introducing the Patriot. The Patriot is not compatible with any Soviet systems. So when the Patriot comes in, it's not integrated. The IRIS-T is not compatible with any Soviet systems. And the IRIS-T is not inherently compatible with the Patriot unless somebody brings in that overlying architecture. The same thing with NASAMS. So in supplying Ukraine with these air defense systems, in many ways, the West is actually weakening Ukraine's air defense capabilities because they're ensuring that there is no integrated air defense architecture, that Ukraine's air defense, instead of being a system, has become a collection of individual efforts, each of which can be defeated because they're not being supported by the others. And the Russians are taking advantage of that. I think Russia has won the counter air defense war, and we're seeing the results of that with the relative freedom that Russia enjoys in delivering munitions onto Ukrainian targets.
Bleiben wir beim Thema. Welche Rolle spielen Drohnen im Luftkrieg in der Ukraine? Vor welchen Herausforderungen stellen sie die Luftabwehrsysteme beider Seiten?
I think that this conflict is rewriting what we know of drone warfare. First of all, it's evolving. If you take a look at the number one killer of Ukrainian artillery systems today, it's not Russian counter-battery fire. It's the Lancet missile that is going in and finding targets and destroying the targets. The videos that we see on Telegram, they're a little bit misleading because they're only showing the successes. There are a number of Lancets that go in that miss their targets. They bounce off of screens that the Ukrainians have welded onto their equipment, so they don't penetrate. They fail to explode, just like anything. It's not a perfect weapon, but when it works, it's very lethal, and the Russians are making them in tremendous numbers, and they're getting ready to be introduced. And one of the things the Russians are talking about now is the swarm of drone approach, where it's not firing one Lancet, letting it loiter, find a target and hit. It's going to fire 10, 20, 200 Lancets. They're going to swarm the battlefield, communicate with one another, and then hit targets. Hasn't happened yet, but that's the direction we're going. It's never happened before. It's literally warfare is being rewritten. Drones are becoming a part of your fire and maneuver plan. They have to be integrated into it. And the West isn't ready for this. They're not prepared for what's happening. They're literally a decade behind. And what I mean by a decade behind, I don't necessarily mean that in terms of actual years, but I mean that in terms of because drone warfare has grown exponentially just in the past year. You've had a decade's worth of experience in 1 year crammed in. The Russians have learned 10 years worth of knowledge and insight. So have the Ukrainians, by the way, who are very adept at this as well. It's 10 years of normal experience crammed into a year. And so they're operating well ahead of anything the West is conceiving right now. But the Russians and the Ukrainians right now are using drones in ways that nobody ever envisioned, and they're being very innovative about it. And it's having a significant impact on the battlefield. I don't think a battalion today can imagine operating in the special military operations zone without drone support. That if you don't have drone support, you're in a lot of trouble. You're going to be at a disadvantage. You have to have drones in order to survive.
Kannst du bitte erläutern, wo die Unterschiede liegen zwischen dem Drohnenkrieg der USA in Afghanistan und der neuen Art von Drohnenkrieg, den du soeben skizziert hast?
The U.S. Use of drones in Afghanistan used advanced systems that had lethality, but they operated in a permissive environment. And they were deemed more of a specific fire support, meaning fire one Hellfire missile at a target here, provide area of visual reconnaissance here, surveillance support here. But it wasn't designed to survive in a modern battlefield. The MQ-9 Reaper will not survive in a modern battlefield. Our tactical drones that we developed, the kind that the troops fly out, again, were designed for over-the-horizon, quick look, but not for combat operation. We're so far removed from what the Russians are doing. We have our own suicide drones, the Switchblade drones. They've been given to the Ukrainians, the Six-Blade 300, the 600, and they're being used too. But the battlefield is probably the best laboratory. That's where the most innovation comes, because it's literally do or die. We're not there. We're studying what other people are doing, then we take it to academic institutions, we take it to proving grounds where people theorize, and we adapt it to American reality. And oftentimes what happens is to incorporate drones into your fire maneuver plan is inconvenient. And so you take shortcuts, you make adaptations that don't enhance lethality, but enhance convenience. That's a peacetime mindset. And so whatever we're doing with drones right now in the peacetime, a lot of it's being done based upon peacetime realities, lack of training opportunities, lack of logistical support, lack of creative thinking. None of that's taking place on the front line in Ukraine today. So there's a difference between the laboratories of development. One is real with immediate feedback, life or death consequences. The other is theoretical, based upon peacetime contingencies, et cetera. I think the U.S. is far behind where it needs to be in drones. If we took what we have today, what we use today, and applied it in a combat situation such as that being experienced by the Ukrainians and Russians, our drones are not survivable. We find out the hard way. The Russians themselves talk about the fact that when they bring in these drones, these commercial drones, there are limitations in terms of the range that it operates. And so these very smart kids who have adapted this come out and they start operating, but you're sending a signal, and that signal gets detected, and then the Ukrainians kill the very smart kids. They're losing a lot of kids that way. So the Russians have had to adapt. They need to put out repeater antennas so that the kid can be hiding in a reinforced bunker. And if the enemy is detecting the signal, it's going to be detected to an antenna that's been offset by several kilometers with a landline connecting it. So it blows that up, but not the operator. This is a level of lethality that isn't being, this is survivability based upon the lethality of the modern battlefield that you learn only by doing. And I don't think the United States right now, we've quite adapted to that yet.
Vielen Dank, Scott, wie immer für die interessanten Berichte und Analysen.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day.
Dankeschön. Bis nächste Woche. Liebe Zuschauer, euch auch herzlichen Dank fürs Zusehen. Wenn euch die Sendung gefallen hat, teilt das Video bitte breit in den sozialen Medien, abonniert eben noch unseren Kanal Gegenpol und wenn ihr selbst Fragen habt, die wir Scott Ritter stellen sollen, dann schreibt sie uns in die Kommentare. Bis dahin, bis nächste Woche. Tschüss.